idea of thinking about death seems to only compound and make me more miserable. How then do I juxtapose or practice this idea of mourning when, number one, I'm going to have two parts to my question. Number one, I have a difficulty with that. I don't want to think about it. I'm already down. I need something to get me up. That's number one. And number two, how do I do that when the church that I attend, and I'm saying this as in people, not just like I'm actually attending, I'm saying most people that I know, where there seems to be no room for that, even in the discussion. There's no, they have zero desire to implement something like that. How do I help draw attention to that in a church today?
Well, denial is never helpful. And I'm afraid that's what happens. You're right. We are struggling. I sometimes quote Michel de Montaigne, French philosopher, who said, "My life has been full of terrible misfortune, most of which has never happened." This sort of Sicilian limbic system of mind. It's always worrying, always tightly wound. And we can do that. And I think that's increasingly common today. What catastrophe will befall me next? How do we do it? We don't ignore it. We don't binge watch Netflix and try to somehow get our mind off it. We recognize it as reality, and then we appropriate the resources of grace to deal with it. And that's what Jesus offers. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Now, let's be honest, Travis, there's some situations that involve intractable pain. A person who loses a child or a loved one who receives a terminal diagnosis, we walk alongside those friends. What gift do we have to offer? Well, the gift of our presence. First, we don't want to be like Job and try to fix things that are not fixable.
You mean Job's friends? Job's friends.
Job's friends,
Yeah,
pardon me.
Job's
Yeah,
friends.
right. Yeah, thank you.
Job was like, you suck.
Yeah, right. And I mean, I've been on both sides of that.
Yeah.
I've been in pain with a loquacious friend, and I'm sure I've been overly verbose trying to comfort someone. So what do we do? We bring the presence of God. Here's a story I tell in the book. I have a son who has a condition called hemophilia. Yeah. His blood does not naturally clot. So when he was born, we had him in this large rubber tube in our living room where he learned how to walk, because if he had fallen on the hard ground, that would have likely sent us to the ER because it would have created a bleed. So the first few years of his life were fraught with anxiety. And fast forwarding now to, I forget how old, but he's learning how to ride a bicycle. And so you can imagine he's got the elbow pads, the knee pads, his new little bike with the bell. We're going out, and I'm behind him, ready to sort of lunge onto the ground and become a paternal cushion as he falls. So we did like a half an hour of this down the sidewalk, and I've got sweat pouring from my forehead. And after it was done, we're walking back to our house, and I'm holding his hand. And it was as though God spoke to me in that moment saying, look, if you love your son that much to throw yourself down on the ground, cushion his fall, how much do you suppose I love you? And we know the answer to that. He demonstrated his love by giving his son to die for us. That's the extent of God's love. And I think that's where we find comfort, in the reality of a Savior who came to bear our penalty for sin, who understands our weakness and our pain, and who now lives. And so and this is Bonhoeffer too, when he talks about life together. He says we need to surround one another, particularly those who are in pain, with this truth. And that's the only way we're going to make it through the city of man, together, bearing one another's burdens in that way.
What role, though, does in that lament play as we're helping one another, but we have our own pain? You said we bring it to Jesus.